water weight gain. Why is this such a huge problem that everybody is trying to solve right now? Probably because of the last part, right? The weight gain. It's not so much the water, but the actual weight gain. So if those words seem to just strike fear in you when you're thinking about watching that scale and the scale going up, even though a lot of times people are like, oh, it's just water weight. When they lose it, people are like, oh, it's just water weight, and they're happy. But when they're gaining it, it's like, oh, it's just water weight. And that's not a good enough excuse anymore. So if you're somebody who is constantly running from or trying to solve the water weight problem, let's talk about it. So when it's that time of the month, or you have a sodium fest and you can't squeeze into your good clothes, or your jewelry is cutting off your circulation, not so fun. But is water really our nemesis? Now, one of the things with water weight is that yes, if you have too much retained water, it can become an issue, because that can start to contaminate when your kidneys can't filter it out, which makes your liver work harder, and that causes some interference with the bodily processes. So when you start to be waterlogged and bloated, a lot of times that can then lead to a problem with sodium, because you're often dehydrated. So that's the first thing that I would look at when you're talking about water retention, is the fact that, are you already dehydrated? So contrary to popular belief, just because your body's retaining water doesn't mean you have plenty of it. It means that it's scarce. So your body is overcompensating by holding on to as much as possible. That's when you become a lot more sensitive to, sodium or certain types of workouts, or maybe during that time of the month, you're somebody who seems like you bloat up even more than normal people, whatever normal is. That is something to consider. So the first thing to think about if you're dealing with water weight gain is, can we find out whether or not you've actually had enough hydration up to this point before reaching for diuretics or eating tons of asparagus or whatever the case may be, trying to get rid of the water retention. Making sure that you are overly hydrated can actually help to reduce so much of that water retention. So this is one of the reasons why you hear a lot of bodybuilders, or you see a lot of bodybuilders with the gallon jug of water. And when bodybuilders are getting closer and closer to competition, they're drinking, 1-2 gallons of water a day, because they're trying to keep things constantly flush. Because actually, the more water you drink, the more you start to experience some of that shrink wrapped feeling around your muscles, versus things being a little bit more softer, because you have all of this water that's on the subcutaneous level, which is actually on top of your muscles instead of inside of the muscle where it should be. Which brings me to a huge point. When you are lifting weights, every time you go into the gym and you lift weights, the goal actually of resistance training is that you are essentially tearing the muscle, and then it is going to grow back. When it heals, it's going to grow back bigger, better, more defined. It's more visible. In order for that to happen, water is pulled inside of the muscle. So that is the reason why so many women, when they first start strength training, notice that the scale might start to go up. Because if you're someone who does lift regularly, you are going to see a little bit more of that water retention on the scale, even if you don't necessarily see it in the mirror. So that is a big thing too, is understanding that what's happening beneath the surface is always deeper than most of us are thinking. If you're only looking at the scale and you lift weights and the number goes up, it can be very easy to put 2 and 2 together and say, lifting weights is making me gain weight, so therefore I should not do it, rather than understanding that that water retention is actually helping. So most of your anaerobic style workouts, the workouts that are actually going to help you burn more fat in the long run, more fat when you're just sitting still watching Netflix, are going to be the ones that have the highest water retention rate, because of the fact that they're usually pulling in that water to the muscles somewhere after that workout. Now, that is something that you want to think about, because this also means that when you are in a periodized workout, which is something that I highly recommend, obviously, if you're somebody that's already using my workout app, you're already experiencing the periodization. But periodization is when you are constantly changing your workouts from one phase to the next. So maybe you do 4 to 6 weeks in one phase, and then you switch and you do 4 to 6 weeks in another phase, and you switch again. So whether the phase is endurance or hypertrophy or strength, you're kind of rotating between these different phases so that the muscle is constantly having to adapt, because of the fact that once it does adapt, it actually stops working. So a big part of avoiding that adaptation process or breaking it is by having this periodization. Now, the flip side of that periodization is that it's not uncommon for you to see this excess water retention when you're switching phases, which means if you're in a consistently periodized phase where, say, you're changing things up every 4 weeks, then that is something that is going to be completely normal, gaining anywhere from 3 to 5 pounds at the beginning of each phase. Usually by the time you get into week 3 to 4 of that phase, especially all other things consistent, you've been eating the exact same way the entire time, same calories, same macros, nothing is changing other than your workouts, you will see that little spike at the beginning of the new phase, and then it will slowly fade away again towards the end of the phase. Now, like I said, the whole thing is that you're changing it again. So typically right when it's starting, when your weight is starting to trend down again, back to wherever it was beforehand, if you're in maintenance, or back down to that new low, if you're in a cut phase, if you switch phases again, guess what? That little spike is going to occur again. If this is something that completely bothers you to no end, then maybe it's best to just focus on your macros and focus on getting in the lifts and not pay so much attention to the scale, because if that is going to distract you from the bigger picture, which is the fact that these periodized workouts, nailing your macros, anaerobic styles like lifting and cardio are actually going to be the things that are making the biggest impact on your physique goals. So you want to take care in not associating what's happening with the scale to the actual exercise that you're doing. Because a lot of times you'll find that if you're doing traditional steady state cardio, you will see that scale drop. Now, remember what we said in the very beginning of this video. Part of that is dehydration. So if you are somebody who ever has weighed yourself, done cardio, weighed yourself again, if you lost weight after that cardio session, that is actually indicating how much water you need to replace. It does not indicate that cardio is helping you to lose more weight. So that's something that if we can mentally disconnect the two and mentally understand that just because the scale is going down, that does not mean that you're actually reaching your fat loss goals, because of the fact that you're just getting more and more dehydrated, which means you're just going to keep trying to lean into things, diets, types of exercise styles that dehydrate you instead of the ones that are pulling water into the muscles so that they can grow leaner and more defined, so that as you're losing fat, you start to really see this muscle definition below. If you're somebody who's looking for that tone, that muscle definition, you're trying to lose body fat, you do not want to stay away from the things that are causing the water weight gain. Now, if it's something like a processed meat or something that's causing the water weight gain, then that's up to you to say like, okay, I can only do so much, like lunch meat or, bacon or sausage or something like that, because of the fact that my body is so sensitive. You can choose to eat less of certain foods that cause the water retention and bloating, or again, go back to step one and up your water intake game so that it is a little bit more regulated. There are definitely types of foods and things like that that will help to regulate that and will help you to release a little bit of that water weight. But the first thing that I would always go to is making sure that you are actually taking in enough water so that you're not just creating a bigger problem by leaning into foods or supplements that are causing you to release water weight, because eventually that's just going to cause more and more dehydration. And the more dehydrated you are, the less attention you're paying to your muscles. Remember, muscle without water is jerky. That is not what you want. You want nice, full muscles. So you want to do the exercises that are bringing that water into the muscle, and you want to constantly be replenishing the amount of water that you're drinking. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to why the things are happening with the scale if you're choosing to weigh, and see if you can start to find a pattern. If it's specific food, if it is specific workout styles, then you want to take them both with a grain of salt, because oftentimes the foods that have higher sodium, with the exception of something that's like maybe a takeout meal or something that has like excess sodium, often those are high protein foods. So maybe you increase your protein intake, and the types of protein that you're taking in have a little bit of a higher sodium count. The sodium is not the issue. It's just a matter of how are you balancing that out? Are you getting in enough of water? Are you getting in enough potassium? Things like that that actually balance the sodium out. being overly concerned with reducing your sodium to super minimal amounts, or to only eating foods that don't cause water retention, or to only doing workouts that don't cause water retention, all end up backfiring in the long run, because your body still needs all of those things. It still needs you to lift weights. It still needs you to drink lots of water. It still probably needs some of the foods that have sodium in there. And your body actually needs sodium, period. It's actually good for you. If you go look at the drinks that athletes hydrate with, typically that's one of the main ingredients in it, is that sodium. So just something to consider if you find yourself constantly running from water weight gain and trying to figure out ways to avoid it, or what workouts to avoid it, or getting scared and running away every single time your scale moves up. Because the thing is that as important as it is to remember that, yes, these things do cause the sodium retention or the water retention, running away from them can lead you further and further away from the results that you want. So instead of trying to associate them one for one, like, okay, I'm not going to lift, I'm not going to do periodized workouts, I'm not going to do HIIT style lifting, I'm only going to eat vegetables because meat is bloating me, or whatever those things are, you have to think about what is the alternative. Doing the exact same thing that you've been doing, or doing this huge attempt to avoid water weight and seeing no results just because, your body adapts and it feels good to finally have it adapted. So you're scared to move on to the next phase. You're scared to try a new workout style. You're scared to move into, a hypertrophy phase because maybe when you were just doing a bunch of cardio or your body adapted to a strength phase, you weren't seeing as much water retention. Just something to start to think about. Typically, those workouts that have a little bit more muscle soreness are the ones that are going to cause a little bit more water retention. That's one of the patterns that you could look for as well. But to sum it up, I would say that if you are someone who is doing a lot of the lifting, the HIIT workouts, eating the protein, doing the things that are most successful people do for weight loss, and you are seeing that water retention, ask yourself if that is something that you can get okay with. Because typically the people that have the physiques of, whether you're looking for like a CrossFitter physique or a bodybuilder physique, these leaned out physiques, they are a lot less concerned with what the scale is doing day to day, and a lot more concerned with the progress that is compounding over time. So a lean, fit, healthy, athletic, muscular, defined body will likely have a lot more of those scale spikes and retain more water overall. So if you could get okay with having this 3 to 5 pound window that you allow yourself to float between, and before you actually get into panic mode, you'll find that you get so much more progress, especially in the department of losing fat and keeping your muscles. So hopefully that cleared a little bit more of that up. If you have any questions about water retention, or you feel like yours is a little more outrageous than everybody else's, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Are you constantly running from the water weight gain, or is this something that you're willing to put up with for the sake of reaching your goals? Like, are you okay with being a weight that doesn't make sense in your head, as long as what you see in the mirror makes 100% perfect sense and you're completely satisfied with it? Can you disassociate the two, or do they have to go hand in hand? That's a decision that only you can make. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next Thursday.